I'm Kathy from Eclectic Images and thank you for joining me for another Crafting with Kathy. Today we're using the new Dreamcatcher stamp and I'm going to use it in a way that shows you how versatile this stamp can be. We've actually made it in two parts, so rather than being a complete Dreamcatcher, we have the circle part and the feather part separate, which means that you can use it as a whole Dreamcatcher, or you can do what we're doing today and use it as a background stamp in its two parts. So let's have a look at the stamps we're using today. So we've got Dreamcatcher and Unicorn Beauty. And then I'm going to be colouring with the Catherine Pooler, this is the Spring Fling set of 8 mini inks, and this is the lightest of the Life of the Party collection, or party collection. And then we're also doing some colouring with the Uniquely Creative brush watercolour markers, which are great to colour with. Really good colours. In fact, I've got my little swatch here so I can show you how cool the colours are. Like, how groovy is that? So yes, we've got all these colours to play with. So we're going to do a soft background with the inks and then do some more vivid colouring with the markers. But to start with, let's get our stamps embossed on and then we can start creating our background around that. So when I find what I've done with my anti-static pad, I'll give the card a swipe with that. And then we're going to stamp with Versamark and emboss with gold. So we'll do the unicorn first and then stamp the other bits around him. Let's ink up our stamp nice and thoroughly. And poor Matthew, I've just decided to ink a stamp well out of where he's normally filming. Okay, inking up with Versamark. Place him fairly centrally on the card so that I'll be able to fit the Dreamcatcher around him. Press down nice and firmly, of course. And then realise that I haven't got my embossing powder or my catching sheet quite ready, so we'll just get the lid off the embossing powder there. Lift up and place our embossing powder on. Just give it a little bit of a tap. And I'm just checking, I've got a few little bits there I don't want. Excellent, just clean those bits up a little bit. Right, let's get that one heated and then we can stamp the others around. Just warming the page and my heat gun up a little bit. It's quite a cold night here in Ballarat tonight. And there we go. In fact, it's a bit tempting just to sit here and warm my own hands with the heat gun. But we'll keep doing our embossing. Gold is just so magic, isn't it? Okay. Now, quick look across the light and make sure I've got nice, shiny, smooth embossing powder everywhere, and I have. So now I'm going to place a mask over him. Should actually turn it around so you can see him the right way up, shouldn't I? And then we'll grab our Dreamcatcher circle, ink that up with the Versamark. Just make sure my mask is covering him nicely. And stamp the Dreamcatcher up above him. Now I've got to press down fairly firmly. Pop our embossing powder on. Now I know I have a rule of don't emboss over where you've already embossed, but that's when we're doing silhouettes on scenes. That doesn't relate to what we're doing here with creating a collage image. I don't mind if there's any gaps where his mane goes because we're looking at flying bits of hair that could be going in front of the Dreamcatcher or behind it. Now, inking up the feathers. And we'll just position those sort of like they're hanging off his mane a bit. Okay. Being careful not to put my thumb in the embossing powder that's up the top of the card until I've had a chance to heat it all. Okay. Checking for any errant bits of embossing powder, but that all looks pretty good. So I can empty everything back into my jar. And get the heat gun going. This is going to look very pretty. Okay, now move my scratch pad out of the way because we're going to create some smooshy background inks on our craft mat here. So the colours I've chosen from the Spring Fling set are It's a Boy, Melon Ice and Garden Party. So some blues and greens. So we'll put some blues out. And then mist that with some water. So I can see some colour beading up. And then we just smoosh. Oh, I'm going to give the card a little bit of a mist first, just to make sure that the inks smoosh on it really nicely. So pick it up, see how we're going. Oh, that is very cool straight away. I usually like to do a couple of smooshes, but that's looking pretty... No, I can't resist. I have to do another smoosh. That just made Matthew laugh. There we go. Okay, that is just gorgeous. So I've got a little bit more colour around the outer edge and less on him, which suits me just fine. Let's just add... No, don't mess with it. It's looking really good. Clean your mat up. Now, if I was crafting just for myself, I would create another couple of backgrounds from all that beautiful colour that's there. But I want to just keep moving with this one bit of card. And so as well as drying off my mat, I'm just going to dry where there's a little bit of heavier ink up in that corner there. And then we'll give it a bit of a dry with our heat gun. If you had too much colour, we could get a bit of paper towel and just dab it off, but I'm really happy with the amount of colour that's there, so I don't want to take any off. So when you're drying your card with your heat gun, just make sure you keep the heat gun moving, because we don't want to overheat that embossing powder and actually make it flatten back down again. We don't want to overheat it. I will take a few dabs off there. Let's turn our card over and dry from this side, which will help flatten it out a little bit. Okay, looking good. So how lovely and smooshy is that? Now, bring my scratch pad back up again. So that was just me smoothing out the card just to flatten it back down a little bit. If you're doing backgrounds, you can actually flatten them by running them through your laminator or ironing them. But of course we can't do that to this one because we've already got embossing on it. So now, my plan of colouring and seeing whether I still want to do that same plan. My plan was to add a little bit of grey to him. And now I'm sort of changing my mind a little bit, because does he even need any colouring? I think we're just going to go very subtle. So let's make sure I've got some water through my water brush. So a little bit of colour of grey just along the inside of his neck there, and then I'm just going to bleed that out with my water brush. Clean my water brush and just soften those colours in together. It's actually blending in beautifully with the colours that are there from the smooshing. We're getting a really nice mix of colour coming through, but I'm just having to soften where that pale green ink is on him to make sure that it blends in with our shading. A little bit more in there. I'm turning the card around so that I can butt the tip of the brush right up to that embossing edge without going over the edge. So if you need to, just clean your brush, and then you can come in and just sweep some more water on just to smooth that in so that it blends in with everything else. Let's do just a smidgy down his face because I'm really liking how that's looking on his neck there. If you need to take some out, just clean your brush. And just come in and almost wipe it with the brush until you've lifted some of that colour out. Now I'm just looking at him, seeing if he needs anything else. Now I'm thinking of where shadows would occur, and of course we would have some shadow along this bottom edge of his jawline, so let's shade in there a little bit as well. So I am having to go over a little bit just to make sure that I don't get any lines where the grey is meeting in with the base colour. So I'm just going over it a bit, making sure that's all really soft. So that just makes him stand out a little bit more. Now we're going to come in with a little bit of stenciling and some of the colours that we've already used. I think the main one that's going to work is the It's a Boy. And we've got the BeeArty Kaleidascope stencil. Let me put that over the black so you can see it. This is part of the BeeArty Bohemian Bliss range. So it's got the main kaleidoscope area there, but it's also got 4 really cool different corners, so we can pick out those corners. But let's just add a little bit of shading. Or do I just want the corners? Here's me having a plan and then thinking, oh, but I could do this and I could do that, and changing my mind as I go along with the plan. Okay, let's grab a little bit of ink here. Just dust it lightly through our stencil. Don't want it being too strong, I just want it being fairly soft in there. Excellent. And we might do a little bit coming down from him here. Just hold the stencil in place. You can lift it up and see how the effect is looking, and then lay the stencil down to add a bit more in if you want to, or look at it and go, no, that's looking pretty much what I wanted. Just a hint of stenciling. Now I'm going to come in around the corners, and the hardest thing with this is decide which corner I want to use because they're all really pretty. I reckon this one. So this one I'm going to, because it's got quite a definite corner edge to it, I've just got to make sure that I've actually got it, and I can see through the stencil. Let me hold this up for a close up. I can see through the stencil to see that I've got an even border. I don't want it looking crooked, and I don't want to have a big border one side and not the same the other side. So I've just got to look at that carefully, make sure I've lined up a fairly even border. And then if I want to do it in all 4 corners, I have to make sure that I repeat that same spacing. Well, I feel like I do need to make it really work. So I'm still using the It's a Boy colour. Let's have a little look before we move the stencil. Perfect. So I'm doing the diagonal corner first because then I can have a look and see whether that's enough or whether I want to do all 4 corners. Often diagonal things work better than doing both on the... it's much of a muchness. Diagonals can look really interesting, but sometimes just doing your design on one side of the card or along the top and the bottom can work as well. But we're sort of looking, we've got a little bit of a flow to our card that way. And you know, for a change, I'm going to leave it pretty much as it is. I'm just going to bring a little bit more stenciling down into this corner a bit, but without doing the actual corner shape. So let's not re-ink our brush and just very lightly fill a bit more stencil in. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to leave that like that. Matthew just laughed. He knows that look on my face where I'm going, am I happy or do I add a little bit more? I think we could have another bit of the stencil. To me, it's ending a little bit abruptly. So again, I'm just going to line it up there and then without re-inking the brush, just dust on a little bit more colour. I think that will be enough. That to me just completes that shape a little bit. Okay, now let's add some more colour to our unicorn. This is looking really cool. So I'm going to come in, I've picked out some blues and a green and just want to add some colours, particularly the blues to start with, into his mane. Now usually I come over with a water brush and blend these, but because I've got so much already happening in the background and it's inks, but the Catherine Pooler Colours inks are water soluble and water reactive. So if I go over the background area, like happened when we were shading the horse, it's going to affect those background inks. So if I add water into this mane, it's going to then start reactivating those inks and blending into it. So for today, instead of softening it out, I'm just going to colour with the markers direct and just let it flow a little bit. Just following the lines of the mane there. So I'm actually lifting off a little bit. So starting off, and this is the advantage of these lovely fine brushes, is that as I lift the brush, I can get really nice fine points. I can also colour quite strongly in along the neck there and then just stroke that colour out. And if it's not the exact same shape as the embossing, that's fine, because the embossing is going to give those lines for you. I'll just turn the card around so that I work at a good angle for me. And I actually don't think we need any of the darker blue. I think the lighter blue is working beautifully. So we'll bring the darker blue in on our dream catcher. And I've started colouring an area, an item that's going to need a whole lot of colouring. But I can actually, because that beautiful embossing that gives you an edge to colour up to, I can actually colour quite a few of the bits of the rope in one go. Just checking that I'm not putting my hand in such a way that I'll smudge any of that work that we've already done. So as I turn the card around, so I'm working that tip of the brush to the edge that I want to get nice and close to. And I think we need to bring this colour down into the feathers. Now on the actual feathers, I'm going to do some blue down the middle of them, but then bring this green in. And I don't want to colour the whole shape. Like I'm not deliberately colouring right to the end on the feathers or right to the edges. I'm just going from the blue, which is sort of blending the colours in a bit together, and almost just feathering the feathers. Does that make sense? You've got to love a bit of just random colouring though, without having to be precise about it. But I think that looks very cool with the blue centre to the feather and then the green blending with it as we pull it out from that blue. Gorgeous. Love how we've got layers happening there. Now, when you're putting your lids back on your markers, be really careful not to smoosh the brush end with your lid. Make sure it's nice and central because you don't want to wreck that lovely fine point. So just be careful when you're putting your lids on to make sure that you're protecting your brushes. And now the last thing that this needs is some glossy accents on the beads. Making them look like beads. And we'll pop a little bit. Actually, we need to give him a nice dark blue eye too, don't we? And did I have a yellow out? Let me just grab a yellow just to add a little bit of colour to his unicorn horn. Now we'll come back over his eye with the glossy accents and some on that lovely unicorn horn. And I think I'm going to leave it like that. I'm not going to add any glitter to this one. I really like the matte look of the inks in the background and the stenciling. So I hope you like it, but I think I'm happy with that one just as it is. Let's take the scratch pad out and have a nice look at it just on the craft mat. I love the little bit of shading that we've done on him. That I think that just gives the horse or the unicorn a little bit more body there, and it really looks like his mane's flicking around and the feathers are flicking out from it. So very happy with this one. Love that extra little bit of layering and shading we've done in the background. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and I hope you have a play with mixing some smooshing of inks, but then mixing it in with some more stronger colouring as well, and see how you go. And also look at your stamps in a different way. How can we break them up and use them as collage elements with other stamps? So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that one, and we'll see you again next time.